Hello. Hello. Here's a video on overcoming perfectionism. Perfectionism is a subject that has come up a couple of times in the last few weeks for me with clients where I'm coaching people. And I've got people asking me nowadays a little bit more for like business advice as well. One of the biggest hindrances to anybody getting a business off the ground or any enterprise off the ground is perfectionism. So presumably if you found this video, it's by the title, which is Overcoming Perfectionism, so you want to know really quickly in the first session how to overcome perfectionism. One of the ways to overcome it is, as with any problem, is to understand it and to learn how to study the roots of what it is. Very often what perfectionism can come from is a situation with parents who had a never good enough parenting style. You put that in inverted commas, never good enough parenting. Meaning that no matter what the child did, the father or the mother would never give praise. So if you did something amazing, it would be ignored. If you struggled, that would be ignored. If you did something mediocre, that would be ignored or criticised. And it actually is... It's a recurrent theme that's coming up time and again at the moment. I found out somewhere along the way, doing bits and pieces of research for customers who are coming to me with different problems and different issues that I've never dealt with before, because I don't deal with this stuff. It's what people have asked me to do. I'm a life coach, by the way. Hello, if you're new to this channel, I'm a life coach. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a psychotherapist. But people come to me with stuff that really should be being dealt with by psychotherapists, but then isn't. So one thing is anorexia in young girls, in teenage girls, is some of the research indicates that it actually can be associated with a father who is a father coming from the nothing is ever good enough paradigm. A perfectionist, narcissist father can create an anorexic daughter. Can, not always does, but can do. So if you're suffering from perfectionism, you might want to look at the household in which you were raised and your parents, who either would have held you to extremely high standards when nothing was ever really good enough, or that's a very overt way of inducing perfectionism, or you could be raised in a household where your parents were just indifferent, which is a covert way of inducing perfectionism, an invisible way, if you like, of inducing perfectionism. Because the child's brain craves, is probably, hardwired, born into this world with the desire for parental validation. Sometimes when I'm doing coaching with people, I slip into the role of being a sort of a simulated parent for a period of time during the coaching. And I can give validation and praise. And it's a gratifying, but sometimes also a little bit saddening sight to see how happy a grown adult can be when another adult just says to them, "Hey, you're doing okay. You're not a bad person, and what you did there was very brave, and you did well, and you should be proud of yourself." Just that, just simple validation, acknowledgement of another person's suffering or trials or achievements. You can see it on their faces. Like, I see the micro expressions as people try and bundle their emotions back in, because it means a lot. It means more than it maybe should do, because they've not heard it. They've just not been given that, and they're thirsting for that. So if you're a child and you're born into the world with a desire for parental validation, as all children are, and you don't get that, you don't realize it, but at an unconscious level you're seeking it. And you'll be constantly wondering, what do I need to do to get daddy's love and attention? What do I need to do to get mummy's praise, to get mummy to give me a pat on the head? The bleed over of that, not to drift off from the topic of this video, can be to create a codependent personality type, a people pleaser personality type, who will end up in abusive relationships with emotionally distant partners like narcissists, psychopaths, borderlines, or people who are just Machiavellian and abusive, in an effort to resolve that childhood dilemma in an adult relationship with somebody who is always withdrawing and always pulling away. and this is one of the other things that I've learned, because people have kind of corralled me into learning it, is this is apparently is called, so I learned it really well, didn't I? It's an attachment style. So the way the child attaches to the parent, usually to the opposite gender parent, informs, usually, not always, it can be the same gender parent, but usually. So as a man, I have formed an attachment style with my mother. So if my mother was highly demanding, very difficult to please, very emotionally dysregulated and up and down, constantly emotionally withdrawing and acting like I was a burden, and made me feel guilty for being alive, it's highly likely that that is going to impact my attachment style to all women in a sexual context throughout the rest of my life. It's not as simple as that. It can be the same gender parent that affects you in that way. Obviously, you might not be heterosexual, you might have other preferences, you might be bisexual, you might be homosexual, you might, but it doesn't really matter. The attachment style is still the same. So whoever the most significant parent was, whatever attachment style, or the most traumatic parent, the attachment style with them can inform the way in which we bond with other people. I've digressed there, sorry. Back to perfectionism. It's important because people who have complex PTSD, people who are raised in narcissistic family units, and people who are raised to be the scapegoats often do suffer from perfectionism, because intrinsically they believe, well, there must be something wrong with me. If you abuse a child for no reason and you don't praise a child at all, they will internalise the idea, there must be something wrong with me, there must be something wrong with me, there must be something wrong with me. This is the mantra that is playing in the deepest caverns of the unconscious of people walking around with complex PTSD. And I see that when I work with people, and I know it's there because I think it's there in me. I don't think I've completely gotten rid of that. I think the volume's turned down, but I think it's there and sometimes can come up. There must be something wrong with me. It doesn't matter what I do, or how many YouTube videos I make, or how many people tell me, oh, this is wonderful and it's really helped me and it's really changed my life. If in the core of my being, the inner child, if you like, has a wound, there's a crack in the self-image, and something triggers me, then I'm going to still feel, bad, because I just feel bad. Why? You're great, you do this, you're fine, blah, blah, blah. I just feel bad. So you can't rationalise your way out of some of these emotional problems. So that's where I think a lot of perfectionism comes from. Perfectionism then creates procrastination. People then come to me and tell me that their problem is procrastination, which, as I've said in other videos, procrastination, it doesn't really exist in the narrative that we see it as being. There's nothing, the way I justify that is I would say, well, look, we are biological entities, we live on this planet. There is no mammal, there is no animal in the animal kingdom that procrastinates. If a bird is hungry and needs calories in order to keep flying and keep reproducing and being alive and surviving in the wilderness, it doesn't go, oh, there's a worm. Oh, I'm not going to get it now though. I'll wait a while. Why? Oh, I procrastinate sometimes. It's like, there's a worm, go and eat the worm. If I need to eat, I do it now. If I need whatever I need to keep myself alive, I'm going to do it now. There is no such thing as procrastination in the world, and I don't believe in procrastination in human beings. What I do believe can occur is that there are unconscious blocks that stop us from doing that which we, in inverted commas, in quotes, want to do. I want to start my own business, but I never do. Well, why not? Oh, because I'm procrastinating. No. There's an unconscious block. The unconscious block usually, and when I say usually, I mean it's got to be like 99% of the time, will be to do with safety. If you want to get back into the music industry and go and make music again, but you're procrastinating, you're not procrastinating. There's an unconscious block in the, and it'll flare up in the region of your mind marked safety, because you believe that to go back into the music industry is unsafe. To get back up on stage as a stand-up comic is unsafe. To start a new business is unsafe. And as miserable and frustrated and as frozen and as stuck as you are wherever you're living right now, it's safe. So the unconscious wants safety above all else. Again, that's a biological imperative. There are biological imperatives to survival that actually hold us back in our life. They're like little software faults in the brain, evolutionary software faults that run in the brain. And they can stop us from getting done what we want to do. So perfectionism, realizing that perfectionism can come from, usually will come from childhood trauma. It will come from a parenting style that was not necessarily abusive, maybe just less than ideal. And also that can then impact your self-image. So you've got it over here, like the not good enough parenting style creates perfectionism. That can then damage the self-image, which means that you don't want to progress too far in life because you see it as being unsafe, which then causes procrastination, which we now know doesn't exist. It's actually an unconscious block that is there to keep you safe because you associate fear and pain and danger to success or moving forward or whatever it is. Perfectionism is a good excuse to stop you from moving forward, and it's a good excuse to keep you in the safe zone, you know, of whatever cave you're currently living in, that keeps you nice and small and safe and comfy. But again, another biological drive is homeostasis. We want to keep things the same. The body and the brain will fight change. The body and the brain will fight anything that is going to burn calories that it sees as unnecessary, because you're kind of carrying around not even a caveman, something pre-caveman inside of you. You know, like when we say somebody's lazy or people can be lazy, well, of course we're lazy. There's nothing in nature that just gets up and goes, well, you know what, today I'm going to do 50 burpees. Before breakfast, before my paleo breakfast, 50 burpees, oh for sure, you know, I'm worried about my abs. They're not going to do that because that fucking wastes calories, which then could lead to illness and death in a calorie depleted environment, which is what the wilderness is. There is never an abundance of calories in the wilderness, never, unless, you know, and you could say, there is if they find like a big woolly mammoth that just died and then they can scavenge off it. Okay, so over a 12-month period, yes, there's a big piece, there's a huge amount of calories that's rotting, that's not going to last very long, for what, 2 weeks, and then for the rest of the year. It's not, so that I would assert that we're set. The mind is set, the body is set, the brain is set to struggle, to constantly struggle, but to conserve energy, to be lazy, not procrastinate. Procrastinate is not lazy. The two things are not, they seem to be the same. The brain goes, well, they're the same because it means not doing anything. They're not the same thing. Laziness is a sense, if you think of the human being, the animal machine, as like a car, as an engine with fuel, running around burning calories for no reason is not smart. So there is a tendency towards homeostasis, to keep still. There's an inertia. If you're still, you're going to want to keep still. If you're moving, you'll want to keep moving. But generally speaking, we'll seek to conserve energy, which is another thing that causes quote-unquote procrastination and perfectionism, the desire to stay within these safe boundaries. So what do we do to overcome perfectionism? Realizing where it's from is a big piece of the puzzle. If you know what you're dealing with, you can stop beating yourself up. It's not your fault. Like, you didn't put it there. It's part of the biological machinery. It's a little bit of a software fault that we're all born with. And you know, very often it comes from some parenting styles that are less than ideal. Sometimes information from the environment also tells us that we're not good enough. You could get into that whole thing if you want. Start talking about culture, consumer capitalism, extremely superficial, throwaway, types of narcissistic materialism, which will tell you you're not good enough because you're not, and I'm not, and nobody ever can be. Nobody's good enough. You know, if you go down that route where you start talking about, well, all of our advertising images are of models who look like no one you know. You know, like they're just fantastic looking people who look like nobody in your social circle or my social circle, and even they don't look like that because they're finding like the top 0.01% of an entire population of people and going, these are the best looking people, here they are, they're models. They're also, you know, really, really spending their entire lives making sure that they look absolutely amazing, the diet is amazing, the training is amazing and everything else, and then they go and Photoshop them. So you're looking constantly at pictures of people that nobody looks like. that are so perfect that even those people in those pictures, if you go and look, even they don't look like that, because they then get photoshopped afterwards. So we're creating, it's hyper-idealization, isn't it? So it shows you how crazy we are, because hyper-idealization, as we know, as people who watch this channel know, is something that people do when they're a little bit not well, usually it's a manifestation of a personality disorder, usually called borderline. So hyper-idealization at the cultural level, maybe we are dealing with a borderline personality cultural issue here. My point here is to say, is just that very simple example, of physical beauty, because most of my clients are women. Some of them are young women, and there's a frequent complaint. Young women feeling like they're not pretty enough, they're not good looking enough to even talk to a guy at their high school, a normal guy at their high school, because they're like, well, I don't look like the girls in the music videos, I don't look like the girls in the magazines, I don't look like that girl on that billboard over there. What am I doing? Final point on this, because I'm into advertising and marketing psychology as well. I find it fascinating. It was something wherein I lived in Malaysia for a couple of years, and in Asia it gets taken to the next level, because I just told you, like, nobody looks like the people on those billboards. You're being shown an ideal of, like, you should aspire to this, buy our toothpaste, because this beautiful looking man and woman, they're smiling and looking at each other, you want to be just like them, and nobody looks like that. You go to Asia, particularly in Malaysia, a lot of those adverts on the billboards, they're white people. This is a country that is predominantly Malay, Chinese and Indian, and a good thick end of the wedge of their advertising is white people. They're just like, so they're these huge billboards being advertised to a mixed group of Asians of white people. And that has its own place in Asia. Like, it's associated with sort of an aspirational middle class, upper middle class whiteness is associated with that, which is a whole other issue. Like sociologists and people into that stuff could rip into this, I'm sure. And the models that they use, when they use Asian models, they use the whitest. They'll use people who are mixed heritage models, and then they use like makeup to make them as white as possible. So nobody looks like that. That also creates perfectionism. It's a sick, it's kind of a sick culture that we live in that is inducing perfectionism. And perfectionism obviously will cause like a freezing. People will freeze out because nothing is ever perfect. I mentioned before that this affects enterprise and indeed any business. I can't function with perfectionism. I couldn't do this. I deliberately, this is like, it's a Thursday night, it's 11 o'clock at night. I'm tired because I've been traveling and I'm like not particularly well for the last few days. I'm not ready to do this video, but I was like, well, if I'm going to do a video on overcoming perfectionism, I should just do it. And there's a principle at work when I do this that I use all the time. As I said, people are asking me for business advice, and I think this is probably one of the biggest ones. I never had a name for it. I found somebody who had a name for it, a guy called Dan Kennedy, who's an American marketing guru, talks a lot of sense if you're interested in doing anything to do with running your own business and being a bit of an entrepreneur. How does he call it? It's usually ready, aim, fire, isn't it? Okay, so he calls it ready, fire, aim, which means you just do it without it being perfect, get it out there, and just learn as you go. Every business enterprise that I did that worked did it like that, and I let the market, the clients, teach me what they wanted, which is what I've told you I just did with the Spartan Life Coach. The Spartan Life Coach was originally set up as a project. There was a follow-on project from my other business called Street Fight Secrets, which was a self-defense training enterprise, to take the guys from that and to give them psychology and skills and counseling and self-assertiveness training, and like basic raw life coaching skills like goal setting and motivational stuff for guys. That's why it's called the Spartan Life Coach. It's a martial artsy boys thing, but it didn't go that way. The market, the clients were like, well, here's what we want, and here's who's listening to you, and here's what we're talking about, and here's our issues. So I said, okay, I'm offering life coaching, but people were coming to me and saying, but I have this problem. For example, saying, you know, I'm the victim of childhood abuse, and I'd say, this is a life coaching session, I don't touch that. I get freaked out in the beginning. And they say to me, well, I've already seen 3 counsellors and 4 psychologists and 2 psychiatrists, and I was on drugs for it and blah, blah, blah. Nobody's helped me. I would like to talk to you about it. I would just say, okay, I'm not qualified to do that. Like, but I can have an adult philosophical conversation with you if that's what you want, and we'll see if it helps. And it was in that way that this whole project developed organically. With perfectionism and people who are trying to get stuff done, and where it pertains to business, my advice when it comes to business, the Dan Kennedy thing of ready, fire, aim is hugely important. Just get started, get it out there, get going, start talking to people, don't charge anything, start for free. I started this, Street Fight Secrets, I started by charging very, very small amounts of money for my tutorials. With this, the life coaching, I actually started life coaching people for free. Then I charged very, very little, and it was, you know, go through an apprenticeship. So ready, aim, fire is one principle that comes from Dan Kennedy. That works well. Here's something from me. My principle is see the human. See the human. The biggest mistake people make with business is they start talking in business terms, like they're a huge corporation, like they're Coca-Cola. One of the worst mistakes you could make is to go out, if you're trying to start your own business, and try and model what Mercedes, what Sony, what Coca-Cola, what huge established brands with massive budget, what they do in terms of marketing has nothing to do with what you'll ever in this lifetime do in marketing your business, ever, or any enterprise that it could be a charity. I speak to people who do charity work. I speak to people who do what do you call these projects, the crowd-funded projects, you know, to do different things. People who are writing film scripts, people who are writing novels, people who do music. All of these endeavours, if you're going to talk marketing of that thing that you do, never compare yourself or use big brands as an example. The person you should be comparing yourself to is the guy at the local market who sells t-shirts, the guy at your local market who sells fish, the guy or girl, sorry, got a bit sexist there for a second, got a bit patriarchal, how phallocentric of me. The girl at the local market who, you know, sells, he looks around the room, chairs, folding chairs, there's a folding chair over there, or sofas. That human to human eye contact level of, I have a cool thing here. I think you might want this cool thing. Let's talk about a price. And that basic, simple level, that's not perfect, is it? See, when you start thinking corporate and you start thinking shiny and you start thinking blandness, that's perfectionism, and that will stop you. So you've got to get past that. One final thing, I read it in a book years ago, it was a quote from a Leonard Cohen song where he said, I can't remember the initial part of it, but the second line is, there is a crack in everything. Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. Don't try and make it perfect. If you're a Leonard Cohen fan and you like his music, I'm sure if you were like some technical whiz or like a musical genius, you could find fault in any of his songs. If you really like writing novels, pick out your top 3 novels in the world that you think are perfect, that you think you would love to be able to write like that. There'll be faults in them. There'll be stuff that's wrong in them. Films, paintings, music, artwork, architecture, anything. Coaching videos. This is a good coaching video, I hope. And my coaching sessions are good, but they're not perfect. I keep reminding people, I'm like, okay, you're a perfectionist, but you have come here and you keep coming back and you keep getting sessions with me. Yes. Do you think I'm a good coach? Yeah, sure, it's really helpful. Do you think I'm a perfect coach? I asked this a girl the other day. Do you think I'm a perfect coach? She said, you're perfect for me. I was like, oh, that's sweet, but I'm not perfect. I don't need to be. I don't need to be perfect. I need to be good. I need to be good enough to do the job. Stay focused on what the job is that you're trying to do. Here's the final point. When it comes to overcoming perfectionism and just getting on with whatever it is you're going to do, if you're going to write a novel, see the human. See it from the reader's point of view. When's the last time you read a novel and you're just like, oh, this is really funny, this is really sad, this is a real ride, this is a real page turner, this is exciting. You can give that person that experience. See the human. If you're a chef, think about the last time you ate food that was like amazing and exciting and just so full of flavor and just something that maybe nobody else could make, right? That's what you want to give people. When I do this, so you switch the mindset to, what am I going to give the other person? Whatever I'm going to give the other person, I'm going to give them the most awesome that I can. If you ever listen to Louis C.K., not just his stand-up but his interviews, where he talks about just doing a good job, because that's your fucking job. Just do a good job, because that's what you do. Give the person what they want. Louis C.K. is a good person to model yourself from if you're an entrepreneur, because he is an entrepreneur. He writes, directs, produces and edits his own shows and markets them as well, and he is now a multi-millionaire from it, just through working, honing his craft. No bullshit, no nonsense, no trying to make something bigger than it is, but just being really good at this, which is all I try and do. With the client, that I'm trying to do the best job I can for the client I have in front of me for the hour that they have me booked. That's all. You can't ask me to do more than that. Nobody can ask me to do. I don't ask myself to do more than that. I just do the best I can for that client who is in front of me for the hour that is booked. When I'm making these videos, I just make the best YouTube video that I can with the resources I've got available to me. It's good enough, right? If you enjoyed this video, then you agreed with me, and you agree that it doesn't have to be perfect. This was done off the cuff, totally unexpected. If it's interesting and it's useful, then it's done its job, because I started with the objective in mind. Okay, boys and girls, hopefully that will free some people up, ease them up a little bit to get things done that they otherwise wouldn't have got done because of the bogeyman of perfectionism. Was that a Freudian slip? Freudian slip is when you say one thing but you mean your mother. So thank you for your time and your attention, and I will speak to you again soon.